right. Welcome to Noor America Show. Host Rob Noor. Got an early one for you today because I wanted to get a stream in. I promised I'd get a stream in. Looks like I'm going to be busy tonight. So normally we would do a call-in show Friday evenings. Looks like that's not going to happen. So to everyone at 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight that's like, I'm going to see what Rob's up to on the stream tonight. Sorry I'm not there. Hope you enjoy this live stream that you no doubt missed because you didn't expect me to be streaming before the afternoon. So sorry about that. Sorry. Now, problem's going to be with today. I'm not going to be able to interact a lot with the audience, etc., because I have a hard 1 p.m. outro. So that's an hour and a half we got to go through here. And the video I want to look at today is 45 minutes. And normally when I watch a video, I would say I spend 4 times longer talking about the video than the length of the video. Now, I'm no math whiz, but I think that would put this video at over 3 hours long, and I only have an hour and a half. So something's got to give. So I got to be a little less verbose today and get specifically to what's going on in the video. We might skip through some of the video, but I think it's all important. One brief note I want to say before I get started. I'm an incredibly shitty person in thanking people and interacting with people as much as I should. And I could say, make excuses and say a lot of it has to do with how busy I am. But that's not an excuse. It's really not. Here's the truth of it. I oftentimes, at my point now in my life, don't think about the things that I stream that much until I'm streaming. And it's not just the political topics. Sometimes I'll think about those and I'll do a little research, but it's more so the actual idea of streaming in the first place. And so oftentimes it comes off as short or curt with people that will reach out to me. And so they might reach out and they'll say, hey Rob, what do you think about this? Or hey Rob, is there any way I could help with something like this? Or hey Rob, would you be interested in doing a collaboration like this? I try to respond to people in a timely fashion, but oftentimes I drop the ball. So I know there's been a couple people lately that have offered to help me with my channel in various ways. And I did not respond in a timely manner, and I know that that could leave some people feeling that perhaps I don't appreciate that, which couldn't be further from the truth. I really do appreciate anyone that wants to spend any amount of time trying to help me in any way whatsoever. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes I feel the help comes in forms of ways that I just can't use, and it's difficult for me to put into words why that would be the case. For example, oftentimes people will say, Rob, here's what you should have said in that debate. Here's a 100% clear way to easily win anytime you have a debate like that. And then I'll be like, thanks, or I won't respond. And then maybe they say, Rob's too good to respond to me. Most of the time, the debate advice that I get, I don't think it's really going to help me. There are times it does, and I appreciate people sending me sources or possible arguments, but oftentimes what happens is it's not things that I choose to make as arguments when I'm in a limited debate. I gave the example last night of people that will say things like, if you're debating COVID vaccines, why don't you talk about VAERS? I get those messages all the time. It's not being rude that I'm not using people's advice. I don't think that I'm some sort of expert or better than other people, though let's be honest, I'm pretty good at debate. I will say to people, oftentimes it's more difficult when you're in the heat of the moment having a debate. It's very similar to like watching a sport. Oh, why didn't the quarterback throw to this guy that was open? Well, because in the heat of the moment with 300-pound linemen barreling down on him, he didn't see the open guy. You can still criticize. There's no problem with that. But oftentimes it's difficult to, in that moment, see those sorts of things. So I do apologize if I don't respond to that stuff maybe as politely as I should. The other thing is people have reached out to me a lot for all sorts of things. Sometimes I don't know if it's scammy or not. So, for example, hey, new weight loss program. Hey, would you be interested in this? What if I sent you a free menu? I don't know. What am I supposed to do with that? And then less like that, but I'd like to create a song for you. I'd like to create thumbnails for you. I'd like to edit videos for you. I would like to do this for you. I would like to do that for you. I have an editor, Black Elk, who I think is fantastic. I don't mind people reaching out saying that they would want to help me in some way. But oftentimes I'll see something like that and I will, maybe not respond immediately because I don't know what to say. Like, thanks. And then, at least one person I think had hurt feelings about that because they felt that they were going out of their way to do a lot of work to help me and I wasn't using. And for that, I apologize. Maybe I need to get better at saying, not interested. Please don't waste your time. Not interested. Don't bother to make music for my channel because there's a 95% chance I won't use it. And I don't want you to work very hard on something that won't be usable for me. So I think that's on me, and I need to get better at just telling people no, or telling people like, look, you're risking wasting your own time. I could give you no guarantee. So I just wanted to clear that up. If you're out there and you're thinking like, boy, I'd really like to help Rob by painting him a picture or sending him a cool, song or something. I'm sorry if I didn't respond to you. Anything you send me is appreciated. Rarely will it be used on stream. I don't know. I hope that doesn't come off as rude. And like I said, oftentimes when I'm done streaming, I want to hang out with my family. And you have no idea. I can't help myself. You could see a little where I'm interacting with people that maybe disagree with me. I'll spend hours upon hours upon hours talking to people. And what ends up happening is off stream, I'll get someone, like I'll give you a good example. There was this guy, I can't remember his name, but two guys who were trying to set this debate up with me and Pisco about like the semantical, ordinary or standard legal definition of the term insurrection. I talked to this one guy on X DMs for 2 hours after a show one night. 2 hours. And it's my fault because I can't help myself. This woman I streamed with the other night, Jolie, until 1 a.m. Afterwards, very politely, he's like, hey, I want to introduce you to this left-wing person that'll be willing to debate you. 2 a.m, they're like, what do you think about this? Can we set up a debate on this? Can we do this? Can we do this? It's like, hey, man, I got a family. I'm trying to go to bed. I'm trying to, like, and it's still not an excuse. It's not, even as I'm making the excuse right now. It's not a legitimate excuse. Josie, that was it. And then I'll be like, I'll get back to you later, and then I forget. And then I could see how that would come across as like, oh, this dude's running from me. I had this conversation with him, and he asked to bring it up another time because it's 2 a.m, and they never got back to me. I don't mean to do that. I really don't. I just, when I'm not in streaming mode, oftentimes I just tune out. And maybe that's not the best way to do things and to build an audience, particularly with people that really appreciate what I do and are doing a lot of really nice things to try to help me out. So I apologize. I do, and I'll try to get better on that. That's something I legitimately need to work on. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. Yeah, there was this, the other thing is on X, last night I saw late, one of these people that clips left-wing streamer Destiny's videos, put a video out and tagged me, and that's another thing, right? Like, a lot of times what happens is these people, particularly these left-wing people, there's a lot of left-wing people now that are together in a group. I don't know if it's official or if they've just collaborated together, but you'll see people like Hutch and Pisco and Akana Boy, and then, Pondering, and they all orbit around Destiny. And oftentimes they'll tweet about me, they'll take a clip of my video, or they'll take a tweet that I retweeted, and they won't tag me, and they'll talk about me. Then like 4 days later, someone will tag me in the responses, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And I'll scroll way up, and it's like, what the fuck? But I'm glad that I'm so much content for them. And there's a team of 5 or 6 people that are constantly trying to go through everything I've ever said. It'll take that and a lot more. It'll take more than 6 or 7 of them working in collaboration. So keep going. Maybe build a team of 50 or 60 very smart people, and you'll finally be able to keep up with a dude that works 90 hours a week and does this as a hobby. We're hopeful. We'll hopefully you get there someday. But anyways, one of these people that retweets Destiny tweeted out. Apparently, I do apologize for this. I thought it was something that happened like just the other day. Apparently, it was like 2 weeks ago on Destiny's one show. He had Dylan Burns as a guest and was again talking about me using AI, and then lied and said that on the AI, the paper didn't even really say what I said the AI said it did. That's not true. It did. He lied to his audience again. So I brought the receipts of that on X. And of course, as always, anytime you respond to Destiny, you get a bunch of direct messages like, oh, you fat R word, oh, kill yourself, oh, yeah, okay, cool. You guys are the best. So that's what was going on with me. All that out of the way, I got to be done by 1 p.m. Now I've got an hour and 15 minutes to go through a 45-minute video with you. I want to talk about the great Mike Benz. So we're probably going to skip through some of this video, but I love it when I see someone that does what I do even better. And Mike Benz, when it comes to the important topic, the one I think is the most important, which is corruption in our institutions, is leagues ahead of me. He is leagues ahead of me. And it is absolutely brilliant. And I cannot, if you like what I talk about and things like corruption in our institutions, you should stop listening to me right now and listen to Mike Benz, because he is more well-researched. He presents it in a more level-headed way than me. I think he's absolutely fantastic. A good place to start would be his interview with Tucker Carlson from a few months ago, and then his interview with Tucker Carlson just the other day here. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal how he brings the receipts and is able to go through just how dangerous censorship of free speech on the internet is, and how there's this sort of statecraft institutions of foreign policy in the United States and globally in our European allies that are making a full-throated push for censorship of things that go against particularly right-wing populists. It is unbelievable. Now, is Mike Benz as entertaining as me? I don't know. Is he as good of a debater as me? I don't know. But it's just raw presenting the evidence. I think it is absolutely phenomenal. And I've always said this, I don't need to be the big dog. I do this as a hobby. Sure, if someone offered me $1 million a year to do this full time, I'd take that opportunity. I'd love it. I would have a great time doing it, right? But as it is right now, that's not in the cards for me financially. My number one role and the most important thing I could do in life is to be a good husband, to be a good father, and to be a provider. That means that I currently, because of the situation I've put myself in the past, I work 80, 90 hours a week. That's what I do. I like my job, but that's what's necessary to provide for my family. So that's what I do. I don't need to be the top streamer that talks about these issues. And I've always said this. I've always been shocked that on many of these stories, I don't see anyone covering it better than me. I can no longer say that on the stories I find most important. I think Mike Benz outworks me in every way possible. And I am thrilled to see it. Absolutely thrilled. It excites me. I will be honest, sometimes I get tired of delving into things, news stories, etc. Because at the end, you know the end result. The end result's always going to be nothing's going to be done about it politically. And I'm spending all this time researching stuff that the people that I'm arguing against are just going to say, we don't care, we don't care. And so it becomes frustrating, and sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself. I listened to Mike Benz for 3 hours this morning as I was doing stuff, going to a medical appointment, driving, etc. I was excited to do a deep dive of like 90 hours of research again. I haven't felt this way since like 2019. It was phenomenal. Like, I couldn't wait to stream to talk about the video that we're going to see here now. It is infuriating to see just how corrupt this is. And it's just absolutely devastating and damning. I hope that someday I get to talk to Mike Benz and leave him know my appreciation. For those that don't know, Mike Benz used to work at the State Department in some way, or he worked for the government in some way, started looking into the idea of government censorship in the United States, and it led him on this journey where the past 4 or 5 years he's been sort of talking, please reply to you. Okay, I'm replying. He loves progressive ideology. Cool. Hey, man, you're on Twitch. Great. You said something really cool. He loves progressive ideology. Don't give a shit. Thanks. Anyways, thanks for playing, dude. I responded to you. Happy? Anyways, so I think that regardless of what his motivations are, he talks specifically about the one issue. He's a single issue voter, and his single issue is the importance of free speech online. He talks specifically about how there's other things that he may have opinions on, but he's not wading into that. So, for example, should the United States be engaged in color revolutions by censoring free speech and promoting free speech in other places, in countries around the world? He's like, maybe. There's arguments for that. There's arguments for, hey, if it benefits the United States, why not? There's arguments against it as well. But what he can't accept is free speech being a casualty of that. And that's what he sees as alarming. So he's not making a philosophical argument on whether or not the role of the United States is, hey, if we have to go out and make the world malleable for the interest of the U.S. people, is that something that's legitimate? I would say no. I don't think that that's something that we should usually do. There might be exceptions to that. Mike Benz is like, I'm not even taking a stance on that. I'm just saying that the attack on free speech is unacceptable and will lead to worse outcomes, not just for people around the world, but also the people of the United States. And so he started to get more of a push since about 6 months ago. He did this Tucker Carlson interview, and I'm glad to see that he is growing. What we're going to talk about today, this is just a small snippet of it. Again, I recommend that you work. It's Mike Benz, B-E-N-Z. I recommend you watch his first Tucker appearance from months ago, and then his one from just the other day. I can't recommend it highly enough. What I'm going to show you is a stream he did after, I think just yesterday, after his Tucker Carlson speech that he posted up on X. And it just shows you how infuriating this censorship is. Now, we might skip through it because, again, I have to be done at 1 p.m. and it's a 45-minute video. So we're going to watch it on like time and a half speed. So I apologize if it's too fast. Maybe we'll slow down at the relevant points. But he does a lot of sort of laying the groundwork and explaining that maybe we'll skip through, and maybe I'll do that for you. Now, I'm going to link the video so you'll be able to watch for yourself. But because of the nature of the time constraints, and I don't really want to crib someone's entire video, even if it's someone I respect like Mike Benz, I think maybe it would behoove me to sort of explain sort of the framework before we get into the specific details that I found so interesting. So this video that he's going to be discussing is from 2019, the summer of 2019, and it's from a presentation that the Atlantic Council does. Now, the Atlantic Council, I knew of it before Mike Benz talked about it. I knew that it's an NGO. So it's difficult to put into words, and I haven't done the research completely necessary, but it is evident that many non-governmental organizations that get tons of money from official government organizations, U.S. tax dollars, are basically just the non-governmental arm of these executive agencies, the State Department, the CIA, the FBI, etc. So the way this works is, let's say with the Twitter files, well, it's hard for the government to call for censorship, even though they do. But those get into potential First Amendment issues. But if a private organization's calling for censorship, well, what's the problem there? Private organizations are, and if they just so happen to be getting paid millions of dollars to fund them from your tax dollars, hey, that's still not the government. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. And so this happens all the time. For example, you see our government funds NGOs that deal with immigration. Then these NGOs help illegal immigrants come to the United States. But it's not the U.S. government helping them. It's not the Biden administration. It's just the non-governmental organizations that the Biden administration's funding. You see how that works? So when you say, wow, the Biden administration's helping fund illegal immigrants come, the Democrats say, that's not true. No, they're not. This was this particular organization. And you're like, but that organization gets their money from budgets that the Biden administration signed off on that was supported by the Democrats and even the Republicans. So the government's funding this. Well, no. The government just funded an NGO. What that NGO does is on them. Now, the Atlantic Council is very interesting because it's basically sort of the private organization, the non-governmental organization of NATO, right? And so one of the things Mike Benz talks about a lot, I didn't know this exact number, but I knew this to be true. On the board of directors at the Atlantic Council is 7 former CIA heads. I knew there were at least a few. 7. And as Mike Benz says, most people didn't even know there were 7 former CIA directors still alive. What are the chances that they're all on the board of directors of this organization, the Atlantic Council? Now, I've talked about the Atlantic Council in one specific story that I focused hyper on, which was the Burisma scandal. And if you don't know, just to give you the nuts and bolts of the Burisma scandal, the Obama-Biden administration talked about how in Ukraine there were all these pro-Russian oligarchs that were corrupt. And one of them was this guy named Zlochevsky. Zlochevsky owned this private gas firm called Burisma. And so, not my words, but the Obama-Biden administration was like, this dude's corrupt. He's working with Putin and Russia, etc. And he's a corrupt oligarch that robbed the Ukrainian people of all of this money in various ways, using his influence to get gas contracts, etc., etc., etc. Then we have, of course, Hunter Biden ends up working there. He's on the board of directors of Burisma. All the things that went about, he was lobbying for them, obviously. All the stories that went out. Then we had the famous quid pro quo of his father, Joe Biden, who said unless they fired the prosecutor that at least on paper was tasked with looking into Burisma and Zlochevsky, unless he got fired, $1 billion would be in aid would be withheld from Ukraine. And then, of course, they fired that prosecutor. The new prosecutor comes in. Biden initially says new prosecutor's good. That prosecutor promptly drops all investigations and charges into Burisma. Everybody's happy. Hunter Biden continues to work there, make tons of money, etc. One of the interesting things that I brought up with the Atlantic Council is, while we have people at the State Department that were saying, well, I question whether or not, Hunter Biden should be working there. It looked tenuous at best. It looked like it was bad, a conflict of interest. While that's going on, the Atlantic Council again, former heads of the CIA, starts partnering specifically with Burisma. Now, doesn't that seem odd? If this is this corrupt place that everyone's staying clear of, ran by this corrupt pro-Russian oligarch, why of all places is the Atlantic Council partnering with them? And as Mike Benz talks about in this video, I don't know if we'll get to this point, they announced their partnership like 4 days before Trump was elected. It's absolute insanity. Why are all these former heads of the state? Because we're told, maybe me or you, the average person, didn't know how corrupt Burisma is, but the intel agencies did. So why are all this organization with so many ties to the U.S. State Department intel agencies with 7 former heads of the CIA on the board, why are they working with this pro-Russian oligarch? It's baffling. And then Mike Benz talks more about the Burisma story that I was unaware of. He claims that Burisma was literally just a cutout for all of these U.S. companies and U.S. intel agencies and State Department, etc. They were the cutout that was designed to basically destroy Russia's dominance of Eastern Europe's energy market. So they have a state Russian Gazprom, for example, is the state energy company of Russia. So they wanted to take Gazprom off. And so the way they did that was they worked with these contracts with Burisma. So you had places like ExxonMobil and Chevron that invested billions of dollars into energy into the Ukraine, particularly in the Donbass and Crimea. And then what happened was after the Maidan Revolution, there was a counter-revolution brought about by free speech where you had people in Donbass and Crimea that were like, actually, we want to go with Russia. And this was considered a crisis because if you're these U.S. companies that invested billions of dollars in that region, and all of a sudden it goes with Russia, well, Russia's not going to respect your investment. They're going to say, this is state-owned. Our state-owned energy company now has rights to these energy, not Chevron, not ExxonMobil, not Shell. And so they're working in partnerships with Burisma sort of to ensure that Western companies have access to these markets. It sounds very confusing, but that sort of lays the groundwork for what's going on here. So Atlantic Council will do all these speeches, which no one covers. Journalists aren't covering. And you'll understand why. Because this presentation is a 9-hour speech that Mike Benz viewed in 2019, right? And the audience for this speech is journalists. So there's some 200 journalists, legacy media people in the room, while 2 guys from the Atlantic Council, again, that's basically a cutout for the domestic arm of NATO, with all these former intel people from the United States, UK, etc. on. Right? And they're talking to these journalists about how to censor the internet, how to censor arguments that they don't like. Now, you might say, but wait a minute, why would journalists be anti-free speech? Isn't that the rub? Now, if you followed remotely since 2016, you know that that's absolutely the case. And Mike Benz, in his previous reporting, particularly in his interviews with Tucker, has talked about the U.S. intelligence and statecraft was for free speech because it gave them easy access to countries where they wanted color revolutions and regime change. So if there's no internet, if there's no free speech, and you don't like the government of, say, Belarus, and you're the CIA, how do you infiltrate the people of Belarus to foment enough uprising so that they overthrow their own government? It becomes difficult. If the state controls all of the media, it makes that sort of changing hearts and minds that much more difficult. However, if you have a free and fair internet and things like Telegram where you could push these sorts of arguments to the people of that country by the millions, then it allows you easier access to have academics, implants, etc., good word, Red Hall, to go in there and be able to change this. It makes it much easier. So the United States intel agencies loved a free and open internet and worked with the values of the United States of free speech. So they could say free speech is important, which it is, and say, oh, but we're going to use it to our advantage. Then what happened was in 2014 with Brexit and then with the election of Trump in 2016, they started to realize that that same free speech was detrimental to them back home. So then they had these sort of bifurcated argument. On one hand, depending on the country, they would say free speech is very important. And Mike Benz in the Tucker interview talks about this specifically with Brazil. Lula wins in Brazil, who is sort of who the U.S. State Department wants to win. And so the approach that's being taken is, well, Lula's censorship of X and of Bolsonaro, who was seen as a right-wing populist, that's okay. But had Bolsonaro won, the United States State Department, etc. officials' position would have been the complete opposite. They would have said free speech is so important, and Bolsonaro's trying to restrict it. For example, in Iran, we sanctioned Iran by claiming that they were anti-free speech. So when the country goes in the direction that the U.S. statecraft wants now, the official U.S. statecraft narrative is, oh, we don't need free speech anymore. We don't need voices counter to that. And this has been part and parcel to sort of how these sort of color revolutions in U.S. statecraft has been done for years. For example, Mike Benz talks about in the Tucker interview, when NATO goes into Yugoslavia in 95, one of the first things they did was bomb Yugoslavia's state media outlets. You might say, but isn't that a war crime? You can't just kill journalists. And they said, no, because they're actually enemies because they're propagandizing for the enemy, etc. So it was legitimate. So they understand the importance of controlling the narrative, places like our CIA. Totally get it. They understand it. So, of course, it makes sense that if you're not doing it with bombs and instead you're doing it with censorship, one of the first things you would target is regimes that the U.S. finds hostile. You'll say, we need free speech so people can speak up against that hostile regime. And then once the groups win that we like, and now you have free speech being used to attack them, like maybe Lula in Brazil, they say, no, we don't want this free speech. It's a threat to democracy now. And so what happened was the very same U.S. Intel State Department crap, Mike Benz calls it the blob, the very same people that championed free speech for years and years and years in democracy, all of a sudden after the election of Trump started to write articles about the danger of democracy. Then they realized, wait a minute, that looks really bad. So now they just changed what the meaning of the word democracy is. Democracy doesn't mean the will of the people, you the voter. Democracy means the will of the institutions. And so if 90% of people are against what the institution's consensus is, that's still a threat to democracy. And you're looking at that saying, how? 90% of people, if that's what they want, then that's democratic. That's democracy, right? No, because they've changed what the word democracy means. So if 90% of the people are against, say, continuing to fund Ukraine, that's not the case, but let's say it was. But the U.S. State Department and the CIA and U.S. corporations and the U.S. media were all for it, then it would be a threat to democracy that 90% of people were against it. See, that's, hey, what's up, Contemporary Companion? By the way, sir, I appreciate the little videos you do sometimes with me and other streamers, clipping things in little sections. People should check out your YouTube channel. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much. So that's sort of the groundwork and what's going on here. And so now you see by 2018, 2019, you see this sort of push to censor, at least back home in places like the UK and places like the United States. You see the same people that champion free speech in hostile foreign countries and how important it was, now saying back home we don't want free speech because it's allowing right-wing populists. And they were very worried about what they saw as the direction of right-wing populists in the United States with Trump, in the UK with Brexit, in France with the rise of Marine Le Pen, in Spain, in Italy. You had all of these sort of right-wing populist movements that are coming up. Why? Because it turns out that what the globalists were selling us, this sort of vision of globalization where refugees could just be flooded into your country, etc., that's not popular. It's not popular organically on its own. So you have to control the flow of information. And if a free and open internet exists, it makes it more difficult for them to control the flow of information. Then all of a sudden the votes don't go the ways they want. So they had to change their track of mind. No longer was it about promoting a free and open internet. Now they started to focus on the need to censor disinformation. And so that's where this video comes in, where you have the Atlantic Council talking to a cadre of journalists, explaining to them how to flag posts on social media as disinformation in the hopes of getting that taken down. That's what leads into this. Now, we're going to skip through some of it. I will put the link up. Mike Benz says the best place to reach him is on X, or to view him is on X. So here is the link to this particular video on X. And then we're going to go through this. A lot of this is, I'm going to skip through sort of a lot of this because it's sort of a rehash of what I was just talking about there.
Just how much of an autist I am? I found this clip 5 years ago at the 5-hour, 9-minute mark of a 9-hour conference that I autistically listened to front to back. Like, this is what I was doing in 2019. Like, when people say, Benz, you came out of nowhere. Who put you on? You know, how does this guy, like, he must be working for the CIA. You know, like, how does he know all this stuff? And I've never heard of him before. It's because when you were never hearing of me, I was the watcher. I was the one spending morning, noon, and night, 24/7, doing...
Which I do thank Mike Benz for that. We'll skip ahead a little here, though.
Hour, 7-minute videos. And by the way, this is day 2. I watched the first 9 hours of this in 2019. The day 1 part of this. So your boy put in the hours. But the reason I'm showing this to you is because, and I get to this, actually, let me skip a little bit ahead before we watch this, so that when you watch this, you can process what this is. Okay. So if this is a difficult video for you watching, and you're going to watch the video in a second, here's another shocker. You paid for it. The Atlantic Council receives U.S. taxpayer funding from the State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cutout, the Defense Department, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and numerous other federal agencies. Every single one of those provide annual funding.
So he's talking about the Atlantic Council, this organization we talked about, and the speech that they're going to give here. Notice how your money goes to pay for that. Your tax dollars are going for the very censorship of political ideologies that you stand for.
To influence and advance on the civilian side what the military, intelligence, and diplomacy sphere wants to be done at the geopolitical and military level. Okay? Now, another thing, I actually have a slide on this. Another thing to understand when you watch this, what we're about to watch, because we're going to be going deep on this. So I want you to don't look at this like these are just random people on a panel. Understand what this is, okay? The Atlantic Council has 7 CIA directors on its board. I don't know if you, maybe I can increase the zoom. Okay? A lot of people, and I say this all the time, but for people who are new here, I'm just going to...
So we talked about that. They have 7 former CIA directors. So he's going to go through that.
Do you guys see this? I have to find a way to zoom this. Okay. I think this captures it. One sec. Do you guys see all these people? You see how there's a hashtag in the middle of the room? A social media hashtag? They're symbolically projecting the Atlantic Council has to control speech on social media. Social media is the problem because it's leading to the wrong people getting elected, and that's undermining the State Department's objectives and the Pentagon's objectives. And who they've gathered in the room are journalists from all over the world, from white shoe official media organizations, to train them in best practices on how to stop the flow of disinformation, i.e. anything that supports a populist candidate anywhere in the world. It's like a scene out of a twisted movie. Now, watch this again. 7 CIA directors, annual funding from all 4 branches of the U.S. military, plus the State Department. Now watch this, okay?
And just to start, we're going to come in with one of the most iconic quotes from one of the most iconic lead singers of all time.
Actually, I'm going to skip some of this ahead. I did clip this on a Rumble channel, but I don't want to do the ad, so I'm just going to...
Because whatever. Distort. If you don't like the evidence...
So he's going over the 4 Ds. And this is now like a framework, a formal framework.
So what Mike Benz is going to explain here is the Atlantic Council, again, funded by your tax dollars, former heads of the CIA on it, whose mission at this point is to instruct journalists as to how to flag for censorship posts that they consider disinformation. Now, Mike Benz is going to explain to you the formula they came up with to define disinformation. Now, I've talked about this at quite length. I didn't put it as specific as Mike Benz, which I appreciate his specificity here, and then going exactly what the Atlantic Council says. The truth of something is irrelevant as to whether or not it should be flagged as disinformation. Now, Mike Benz puts it a little more specific. He says there are 3 types of disinformation. There is misinformation, which is information that is incorrect, but you didn't know it. So if you think something's true and say it and it's wrong, that's misinformation. Disinformation is when something's incorrect and you know it was incorrect, so you intentionally lie. That is disinformation. The third is the most prolific and the one that they censor the most, and that is malinformation. Malinformation is truthful information that hurts these institutions. So the example that he gives, and we could see from Zuckerberg saying the other day, and we see from the Twitter files, is censorship on COVID, for example. Much of it wasn't disproven, or much of it ended up being true. So there was pressure on, from the Twitter files, we could see that the original Twitter group that was led by Yoel Roth, that was in communications with these sort of government and NGO organizations, was being pressured to censor people talking about side effects of the COVID vaccine. It didn't matter if those side effects were real. So if I put on X, hey, I got the COVID vaccine, and then all of a sudden I got this horrible rash, and now my arm's numb, and I can't move my arm. That could all be true. Still should be censored. But why it's true? Well, because it's malinformation, which is a form of disinformation that they're censoring. And what does malinformation mean? Truthful information that causes people to not believe a narrative that we think's important. Nina Janikowski, right, or whatever. She was appointed by Biden to lead their disinformation czar, who had to be shamed out of it, but she was connected to the Atlantic Council. Absolutely true. So that's so make no mistake about it. For the people on the left that say, well, that's good, we should censor untruthful information. That's not what the bulk of the censorship's about. It's not about censoring things that are inaccurate. If it was, there'd be an awful lot of stories about Donald Trump, about populists like Marine Le Pen, Nigel Farage, etc., that would be censored because they're untruthful stories. But those stories aren't censored because they're helpful to the public narrative. And we'll get to that. You'll see why I find this clip so persuasive and aggravating at the same time. That really inspired me to talk about it as we get to it coming up. It's surreal. It's going to blow your mind. It blew my mind. It's as bad as I know things are. To see it outlined like this, it was even worse than I could imagine. I'll stop bearing the lead. We'll get to it here eventually. So the truthfulness of it is irrelevant. Now, they go further. The Atlantic Council came up with the formulation that says there are 4 Ds of types of disinformation that should be flagged for censorship. 4 Ds. And so we're going to listen to Mike Benz and the Atlantic Council people explain what those 4 Ds are about.
That DARPA's counter-disinformation stuff does. Ben Nimmo actually, I believe, is actually a part of a formal DARPA counter-misinformation program, along with Renee DiResta. And none of that stuff was publicly, none of that stuff they disclosed publicly, and it ended up coming out in things like the Twitter files and congressional subpoenas. So literally, not only does he work for the military-funded Atlantic Council and the military-funded Graphica and started his career as a formal NATO propagandist at the NATO press office, but he came up with this framework, which is super useful to the censorship industry, and that they cite to this day in 2024. And it's called the 4 Ds of disinformation. Dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. So disinformation is not just something factually wrong. Look how devious this is. He's saying to flag something as disinformation, it doesn't have to be factually wrong. If it simply dismisses something that is right, or if it's as a kernel of truth, but it sort of distorts the truth, or if it's factually true, but it distracts from a larger truth, or if it's true, but it causes dismay, then all of those things are flaggable terms of service violation content in the bucket of disinformation. So, and again, I'm playing this because understand that the biggest bucket in the misdis-malinformation world is malinformation. Information that is technically true, but that undermines public faith and confidence in a government-backed initiative or a blob-backed initiative. Okay? You guys probably saw this in the Twitter files when Renee DiResta sent in, the Stanford Air Observatory sent emails to Yoel Roth saying, Moondance says say those again, you're going to see it in the clip, but it's dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. And he's going to have the journalists chant it back to him and even train them. You're going to watch all this in a second, so just let me keep setting the stage. Understand that they are broadening the definition of disinformation to mean factually true information, which is now known as malinformation, that undermines a preferred blob narrative because its context undermines the narrative, even though its facts are true.
Now, I can't stress this enough. The reason that this is so important is that this is coming from the Atlantic Council. They're the ones who came up with this. They're the ones that are talking to journalists in this clip from 2019. The Atlantic Council, with 7 former heads of the CIA and the board of directors, that gets huge amounts of funding from your tax dollars, is instructing journalists how to censor right-wing populists like Donald Trump. How to and not only would this censorship apply to them pressuring social media, but also implicitly this would mean that the non-social media, but these journalists themselves, aren't going to cover stories fairly that they're being trained to flag as disinformation. You understand? So this is your tax dollars going to the Atlantic Council that has ties to NATO and to our intel agencies, with 7 former heads of the CIA talking to journalists. Now, why did none of these journalists speak up and say, my God, you should have saw what I was at? We're journalists. We're in this for the truth, for free speech. And we're being instructed by an organization that has so many connections to the State Department and to NATO, that has 7 former heads of the CIA, how to pressure social media to censor people's First Amendment rights. Why did none of these journalists speak up? You'll see why. Because they're in on it. They're not pro-First Amendment. They're not pro-democracy. So let's go back to Mike Benz here. What's up, Sparky?
And he is training all of these journalists to absorb this framework. This is how you have, it's not like some crazy thing that the Election Integrity Partnership pressured Twitter 1.0, Yoel Roth and squad, to say, you need to censor anyone who self-reports an adverse injury from vaccines. Because even if it's true and they really were injured by the vaccines, it still undermines public faith and confidence in the fact that vaccines are safe and effective. That was not some crazy, off-the-wall, going rogue thing for EIP. I guess at the time it was the Virality Project for censoring COVID. This is
links
doctrine.
In the chat.
Okay. And this doctrine is being incubated in the Atlantic Council, the military, State Department, CIA back channel of NATO's tank. Think tank, but a lot more emphasis on tank. Again, it's funded by all four branches of the military. So let's keep going.
Fake your own. You come out with your own alternative facts. Distract. If you're accused of something, then you accuse somebody else, either of the same thing or of anything else they can think of. And dismay, you say that if your critic continues down this path, the world will come to an end. Dismiss, distort, distract, and dismay.
Let me, just so you understand how corrupt this is, I'm going to show you one other thing real quick. So you understand how evil this all is and can maybe make sense of some of the other things that I've told you guys. Donald Trump took the oath of office on January 20th, 2017. January 20th, 2017 was Donald Trump's first day in office. Do you know what happened the day before? One day before Donald Trump was sworn into office? The Atlantic Council, with 7 CIA directors and annual funding every year from the State Department, the Pentagon, and CIA cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy, signed a formal deal with Burisma, Hunter Biden's Burisma, signed a formal cooperation agreement.
This is the
just like what the Wilson Center is and all these other major players in the Telegram censorship story. That again,
this is the day before. The day before the oath of office by Donald Trump in 2017, I'm sorry. So if you remember this story, here's what happened, right? Joe Biden issues his quid pro quo at the beginning of that year, forces this prosecutor to be fired. Joe Biden, the U.S. State Department, etc., is saying Burisma is corrupt, Zlochevsky is corrupt, right? Then a new prosecutor gets put in. They say, finally, this prosecutor will get to the bottom of corruption, including things like Burisma. That prosecutor within 6 months drops all charges against Burisma. Joe Biden shows up to the Ukraine, like one of his final acts as vice president, shows up to Ukraine, gives a speech about how proud he is of the prosecutors now doing their best to fight corruption. And then this organization, the Atlantic Council, with ties to U.S. intelligence, etc., that is funded by your tax dollars, signs a partnership with Burisma right before Trump's sworn in. It's surreal.
we're going to get to a little bit later here, is because NATO funds the Atlantic Council to achieve on the civilian side what is necessary for the military or statecraft objective. The State Department and the Pentagon are opposing Russia, but they can't just march into Moscow out of a helicopter. So they have the civil society funded cutout take the actions in the civilian sector that promote NATO's military objectives through the Atlantic Council. Okay, you guys getting this? Let me know, is this pace okay? Is this too many asides? I just feel like you need to understand. This is going to be really helpful when you see how shocking this clip is. But give me some feedback in the chat. I'm just going to take a second and just see what.
Drink your soda, Mike.
We're like, we haven't even started. Like, we've not even penetrated the surface. In the Maidan Square, that January 6th, by the way, one thing that I pulled up here, because again, I screenshotted this. This is Victoria Nuland in December 2013, just 2 months before the CIA-backed Rent-a-Riot in the Maidan Square, that January 6th, that insurrected the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, out of power. Just 2 months before that, the U.S. Embassy, at an event, is the head of the U.S. This is the head of the U.S. Embassy. I guess technically she was the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs, but she was that's the regional coordinator. Or was she the head of the embassy? And was it Jeff Pyatt was Deputy Assistant Secretary? Or sorry, was Assistant Secretary? She is at a meeting. Now, in this clip, Victoria Nuland brags on video that the State Department gave $5 billion to the Ukrainian civil society activists who would then be deployed as street muscle in the color revolution to overthrow the government just 3 months later.
So I've talked about this as well. So these NGOs that were being funded by the U.S. State Department and people like Victoria Nuland, then we're told it was organic. It was organic that they had this uprising against Yanukovych. But they were being funded by U.S. official government sources like the State Department. Many of these were things that were connected to George Soros's Open Society, right? And so the reason this matters, I'm not just saying, oh, Soros. You had simultaneously allegations that came out after this where prosecutors were being hamstrung in Ukraine because they were going after entities that they saw as corrupt in various ways. And the U.S. State Department was reaching out to them saying, hey, don't go after some of these entities. Some of them were connected to George Soros. We assure you we're working with them. They're good people. It must just be a misunderstanding if you think there's corruption going on. For example, George Kent at the State Department testified to that during the Trump impeachment. We didn't have a do not prosecute list. We didn't do those sorts of things. And yet, As I've shown many times in this stream, George Kent personally signed a letter requesting that prosecutors stop looking at the Anti-Corruption Action Center, I believe it's the name of the organization, that also received funding from George Soros and from the U.S. State Department. These are the sorts of organizations, this is how they claim plausible deniability. Oh, it wasn't the United States. The United States didn't lead a color revolution. No, it was organic. Right, led by all of these organizations that were paid millions of dollars by the U.S. State Department, that was achieving goals that were beneficial to the U.S. State Department. And then they were being told, hey, we'll finance. So there was this organization created, there's basically the FBI of Ukraine called the NABU. I forget exactly what it stands for. National Action, Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. It's basically their FBI. It was created basically by the Obama State Department, financed. And then part of it was, but you're going to listen to what we say. So if we tell you not to prosecute certain people, that's what you're going to do. If we say that you're going to lose this certain prosecutor, that's what you're going to do. And that's exactly what happened. And so what he's talking about here is you have Victoria Nuland that's bragging about giving this money, and he's going to want you to look at who this speech was sponsored by. And you can see their logos there on the side of her slides.
Because I think technically it was February 2014, so 3 months. No, 2 months. December, January, 2 months. So this is the head of the U.S. Embassy bragging about what a powerful capacity they have that they can activate on the ground in Ukraine, and what is right, who is it sponsored by? Can you guys read this? You guys see this? Do I need to pull this up in a new image and zoom? As the U.S. Embassy is bragging about the $5 billion in political muscle they pumped into the proxy groups in Ukraine to overthrow the government, the event is sponsored by the very companies who had just signed $10 billion deals with Ukraine's gas giant, Chevron and ExxonMobil. Those are the U.S. companies, but Shell and the UK. Okay, so understand, the fucking oil and gas companies are sponsoring the State Department and its actions to overthrow Ukraine's government so that they control the profits, so that ExxonMobil and Chevron get all the money that Gazprom and Rosneft used to get. And Exxon and Chevron's minion, Victoria Nuland, activated the $5 billion funded Rent a Riot January 6th I'm out of office operation when 1.5 weeks after Viktor Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine, rejected the final offer of the State Department for a financial deal that would have required Naftogaz to be privatized.
Now, he goes into more detail here. We'll skip through this, but again, I'll place this link. I encourage everyone to watch this entire video, right? So he goes into detail exactly how ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Shell, it's sort of this twofold benefit to the organizations that encompass the blob, as he calls it, the U.S. State Department, official U.S. government actions, intel agencies, etc., plus then all of these influences on globalist corporate. So it does two things. One, it harms Russia because it takes away a big case of their profit, which is important. It's something that they want to do for various reasons. But then it also enriches the very people that are in this blob. So it's accomplishing both of these. So Exxon Chevron puts all this money into wanting access to these natural resources in Ukraine. We then see a color revolution that takes Yanukovych out because they're trying to pressure the president of the Ukraine to say, hey, privatize your gas industry. Don't have the government control it anymore. Then these organizations could then buy these deals and go on and do this. He says no. So then almost immediately he's ousted by an organic revolution where we had millions upon millions of dollars going into from the State Department. But then something happened because of free speech. There were a bunch of places in Donbas and Crimea that maybe it was because they were being influenced by propaganda from Russia, etc. But whatever, because there wasn't a control in the flow of information, they decided to go the other direction. And so if the Donbas and Crimea ended up as property of Russia, then this deal still falls through. The whole color revolution would be for naught for ExxonMobil, Chevron, and the blob that wanted access to these resources. Rosneft and Gazprom for Russia's state energy industries would continue to maintain access to the energy resources in the Donbas and Crimea. So that's what he's talking about here. But let's fast forward a little. Okay.
So again, this is the Atlantic Council, partner with Burisma, 7 CIA directors on board, funded by the Pentagon, the CIA, and the State Department.
This is a model that I derived from studying Russian information operations particularly, but we've seen so many different operators using it in so many different environments.
So he's saying, I developed this initially to stop the Russians, but we can actually use it to stop pro-Trump sentiment.
This appears to be
Now, I know what you're thinking. Is he really saying pro-Trump sentiment? It blew my mind. What's about to come here blows my mind. Again, Atlantic Council, 7 former CIA directors, funded by your tax dollars. basically the domestic arm of NATO and U.S. statecraft, talking to journalists about how to flag things as disinformation. That's what the entire speech is about. Originally, we cooked this up to go after Russians, but you could use it for other things. And you might say, really, or are they just talking about Russia? Wait until you see the examples they give of how to use this, right? So I can't stress enough. Again, these are the very groups that you would think would be the bulwark against this sort of corruption. Our own government paying for this, organizations that we've been told for decades were pro-democracy, pro-free speech, paying for this, and journalists who should be all about the truth and free speech, collaborating together to learn tools how to censor even truthful information if it hurts the regime. That's what's happening here.
A fairly generic model of the way in which witnesses will get attacked. There are many other ones, and we're about to play with this whole concept. So Andy will talk you through some of the rules.
Sure. So
now they're going to play a little game here. They're talking about censoring political and cultural ideas that they don't like. They're going to make it a game. You ready?
all of you should have some of these cards on the table. If you don't, look on another table and steal one that's not being used, because these are going to help get our attention.
You want to know what this card says? Now, they're handing out to these journalists these cards. They should all be on the table under your seats, etc. Did you see what the cards say? Did anybody get it? Mike goes into more detail. Look closely. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what's the card going to say? Is it going to have one of the 4 Ds on it? Look at what the card says. These are people that literally are promoting the censorship of you. And now they're going to play a game. And they gave out these very important cards to these journalists.
Witnesses will get attacked. There are many other ones, and we're about to
Pay close attention, see if you can see what this card says.
Sure. So, all of you should have some of these cards on the table.
Can you see that? Does anyone see what it says? I'm not kidding when I say how evil this is and how they're treating it like a game and how excited they are to censor people that disagree with them. Does anyone in the chat, can you make out what's said on that card? It's one word. I don't know if my chat's working. I hope so. That's right, it says bullshit. That's what it says. These are serious people with connections to the intel community, paid for by your government dollars, talking to serious people, legacy journalists, and they're going to play a little game on how can we censor people that we disagree with. And part of that game is we've given everyone a card that says bullshit. And we want you to wave this card in the air when you think you see a post that's bullshit. They're going to play a game. They specifically say it. We're going to play a game. You'll see. It is unbelievable.
If you don't, look on another table and steal one that's not being used, because these are going to help get our attention. We are going to...
Do you see what that placard says? Sound from videos really weak? Okay. Let me add a gain filter to pump it up. Hold on a second here. Let's see, is this better?
Showing quotes from different organizations and individuals who are using certain rhetorical devices to make their argument.
Okay, so he's saying we're going to do an exercise. Journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room. Pentagon, CIA, and State Department spooks here, okay? And he's saying we're going to now, I, sponsored by the Pentagon, are going to train you, private sector independent journalists, to spot the rhetorical devices people online use to make their argument. That's what he said.
And so, if you go through all of them, at least one of these 4 will apply. Again, dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. Everyone say it with me. Dismiss, distort, distract, dismay.
Do you see this? Do you see what they just did? Do you see this? They are training these journalists like sheep. Say it with me. Dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. This is straight out of the same Saul Alinsky bullshit that you see when you see all these protesters from organizations like Black Lives Matter that just keep repeating slogans. It's not about free thinking. It's not about journalists trying to get what the truth is. It's about training them to just repeat mottos, to indoctrinate them, to justify them hating you and wanting you to be censored. Repeat the slogan. Repeat it to us, everyone. Can you imagine being a journalist That, maybe it was like, oh, these people are connected to intel agencies, they get tax dollars. It'll be interesting to see what they say about Russian disinformation. And all of a sudden they hand you a placard that has the word bullshit on it and then say, now repeat after us, repeat the slogan. If you had any integrity, you would be looking around like, what the fuck? Is this out of 1984? What is happening? All of these journalists just repeating this government line? What is this bullshit? How is this holding truth to power? And yet they all do it. They all repeat it. It's unbelievable. Then you have to ask yourself, well, why is no one hearing about this? Why does it take a guy like Mike Benz to go through a public 18-hour conference that was publicly filmed and have to find a 40-minute section in it of just how corrupt this was? Why didn't any journalists report on it? Now you see. They're all the bleeding sheep that are involved with it. Yay! Great!
They are literally getting independent private sector journalists. The CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department are getting swarms of journalists to repeat back to them like bleeding sheep. Bah, bah. Say it with me. Say it with me. Distract, distort, dismiss, dismay. Obedience school is exactly right. NATO obediently training journalists to bleat back to them the censorship framework.
Excellent. I'm not going to ask you to do it backwards because that'll just mess all of you up. So we're going to go through each slide, and if you think you know which of the 4 Ds it is, we want you to hold up your card like this and get our attention.
The 4 Ds of
You're
disinformation.
welcome to scream, I call bullshit, too, if you're comfortable, but it's not a requirement.
Did you hear that? He said you are welcome to scream the word bullshit, but it's not required. Because the placards, they have distributed to every single journalist. Look at there's like 200 journalists in this crowd surrounding an unholy hashtag at the center. And every single journalist has been given a placard that says the word bullshit on it. And NATO, the CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department, the blob, is telling the journalists to take their state-issued bullshit sign and hold it up to the light on what you are about to see.
There will be occasions where it's more than just one of these 4. There could be 2, 3, perhaps even all 4 could be at play. And of course, if you look at every use of rhetoric in politics and persuasion and propaganda.
Use of rhetoric in politics and persuasion. Understand, we are way outside the jurisdiction of true or not.
Mike's absolutely correct here. He just said, we're going to look at things of rhetoric in political issues and persuasion. And how can we flag it as disinformation? Rhetoric in politics. Again, this isn't a debate class that's like, oh, we'll teach you how to argue, and if someone says something, how to say that's not a good argument. This is a CIA NATO cutout funded by your tax dollars instructing journalists on how to flag posts for disinformation to get them censored. And what type of things will they be censoring? Political rhetoric. That's what. Political rhetoric. Remember, as Mike Benz was saying previously, what are they interested in censoring? Well, things like Brexit, things like Trump, things like Marine Le Pen, things like Nigel Farage, right-wing populism. It's not that what they're saying is necessarily not true. It just doesn't help democracy. And what is democracy? The will of the institutions currently in charge.
It's about stopping any kind of rhetorical ability to make your argument if it favors a populist political candidate. Again, this is the summer of 2019, a year and a half before the 2020 election. Just so you understand how it was possible, because the Atlanta Council was the very first partner for Facebook's disinformation team. Okay? And they were formerly, the Atlanta Council was the formal partner of the Department of Homeland Security to censor the 2020 election and COVID. I mean, again, you guys have no idea how deep this goes, but let's just keep going.
Today, there are going to be more techniques than these 4. And so we want you to put your thinking caps on.
Again.
And while we'd love to hear...
Put your thinking caps on and think creatively about how to censor the tweets you're about to see, citing any one of these 4 censorship rationales.
If you can come up with relevant uses of the 4 Ds. If there are other rhetorical tricks and devices you think are going on in a particular quote, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, let's play.
Let's play.
Let's play. Oh, boy. Aren't you happy that your tax dollars are going to this fun game? How to censor you and people that agree with you? Let's play the game. Let's play the censorship game. How could government cutouts, government-funded cutouts, convince journalists that are supposed to hold truth to power to censor you? Let's play the game and see what we could come up with. And by the way, this was something, I believe it was also in the Mueller report. that the IG report looking at Mueller's investigation said that they used to play a game where they would sit in a room and say, let's just name a random person and see how quick we'd be able to connect them to Russia. They played this little fun game. Isn't that great? Only it's not fun. It's smearing people. It's ruining their lives. It's censoring and attacking people that are political opposition. Let's play the censorship game.
The censorship game. How can you justify telling Facebook, telling Twitter, telling YouTube that the thing you saw online is disinformation and getting them to censor it? Let's play a training exercise for journalists by the fucking Pentagon. You guys ready for this? Do you guys think you're ready for this? Tell me in the chat what you think you're about to see. Just write in the chat a tweet that you think is like in the ballpark. I'm curious how good a sense you guys. Just write a sample tweet you think that they are going to train journalists to censor. By the way, I see this user says thanks to tweets. Amazing handle. Because I'm the one who broke the NATO thanks to tweets story because I went through another 5-hour NATO video and then found the entire branding campaign around it. Yeah, America First, Stable Genius.
Now, I will say this. I was shocked. I was like, oh, okay, what sort of tweets are they going to put up on the screen that they're going to say is some sort of disinformation? Is it going to be something about the Iraq War? Is it something about the funding of Ukraine? Is it something about Joe Biden being connected to Ukraine? Is it something about, specifically Mueller? Something like that? I was shocked. I'm going to tell you, I am shocked at what the first two tweets that they talk about. I was absolutely shocked. Even someone like me that understands how corrupt they were, I could not believe the tweets that they're about to put up. Now, I want to, again, lay the groundwork of what this is. They're saying the following tweets are dangerous disinformation that we need to train you to see that's disinformation so that you could pressure social media to censor them. Now, this is 2019, so it's before COVID. But you're thinking like, oh, they'll justify it by saying, well, it's important for the public health. For example, a tweet that says, actually climate change isn't real. It's all made up bullshit. They'll say, well, that's important because climate change could kill us all, blah, 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 blah. That's the stakes here. That's what the game they're playing. Hold up your bullshit placard. Tell us which of the 4 Ds that justifies this being censored. What are the tweets going to be? You ready? You ready? Because I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. It's going to be random Twitter users, right? It's going to be low-level random Twitter users. It's going to be Alex Jones type people, right? You ready?
Yes, okay. Here we go. Let's play. Witch hunt.
Do you see what just happened? What's the very first tweet that they put out? Donald Trump saying witch hunt. I just want you to leave that soak in for a minute. This is dangerous disinformation that needs to be censored. This is 2019. The sitting president of the United States tweets the terms witch hunt in reference to the Russiagate investigation, which we now know was basically a witch hunt. It was a bunch of bullshit that didn't tie Trump to Russia in any way whatsoever. That was illegal. It was a witch hunt. The sitting president of the United States tweeting out 2 words, witch hunt. This NATO cutout, CIA cutout, paid for by your tax dollars to instruct journalists on how to censor disinformation. And the first tweet they put is the sitting president of the United States. Trump is the head of the CIA, the head of these executive branches. And his own people are taking your tax dollars to help undermine the president. That is unbelievable. Witch hunt. Wow, that's disinformation. How? Let's go on. I couldn't believe that that's all they had. Witch hunt? President of the United States. That's the very first tweet they put up. Again, they're training journalists to pressure social media to censor the president of the United States, saying they're out to get me on this Russia stuff and it's bullshit. Nope, you can't say that, Trump. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that, Trump. That should be censored from the American people. They should not be allowed to hear the president saying it's a witch hunt against me. Man, Sparky, go fuck yourself. I don't know what to say. Do you want to join the likes of Just Say Something and stuff like yesterday? I was shocked at the mendacity of the fact that this was the very first tweet that they said that it was just 2 words, witch hunt. I'm glad that maybe you could report this earlier, Sparky. I mean, I don't know. It's constantly frustrating to see the people on my very side downplay what I think are important stories. Be like, well, we already knew this. We already knew this. So thanks a lot, Sparky. Way to join that crew. For the rest of us, I think that this was very important, and I was shocked that this was all they had, that they weren't talking about some lower level streamer. They weren't talking about some big lengthy tweet that Trump said that had old misinformation, that had blatantly unverifiable statistics or something like that. It was literally just the term witch hunt. Sparky says, no big deal. We all knew this. Okay, great, Sparky. Fantastic. I guess I'm not as smart as you. Neither are the other people that are interested in it. So great. I'm glad you're not surprised. Nothing to see. I'm not surprised. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see. Good job, dude. Okay, anyways. Man, nothing like being fucking undermined by the people on your side. Constantly see it. Constantly. Maybe it's time that we talk about Tim Wall's stolen valor. Maybe that's more important to you, Sparky. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he did that, right? We'll talk about it Monday. When I come on your show Monday, you can talk about how everything that I'm interested in and shocked at the levels of depravity and censorship that they'll go through. It's not that surprising at all because you had this all pinned and figured out early. So good job, Sparky. Glad to see it. You can jump on in with all the other right-wingers that wanted to call into my show yesterday to talk about how the things I say are irrelevant and they're not surprising and we all knew about it all the time. So great. Glad that I could count on friends like you to keep pushing that narrative. Anyways, I'll continue talking about my apparently small, feeble-minded brain that is shocked about the lengths that they'll go to censor even their boss, the President of the United States. I'll continue to talk about it because clearly I don't have the intelligence level of the great people that knew all of this and aren't surprised by any of it. I only have 20 minutes left anyway, so sorry to bore you for the next 20 minutes, Sparky. You'll be able to talk about what you want in your show afterwards. Anyways, continuing.
The Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA gathering journalists from around the world in a room, handing each one a state-issued placard that says bullshit, and imploring them to think creatively about ways to get the tweet censored, citing any 4 of these rationales. And the first tweet in the deck is from @RealDonaldTrump in January 2019, calling Russiagate a witch hunt. That is NATO's definition of censorable disinformation on all social media platforms. The sitting U.S. president, with his, at the time, free and unfettered, most popular Twitter account in the world, tweeting out 2 words, witch hunt. And NATO is wheeling in the world's most highest perched journalists from around the world to train them to report this tweet for disinformation.
Keep them in the air if you think you know the answer.
If you're going to keep them in the air, keep
Keep them in the air. Keep your bullshit placard cards in the air.
So we can,
yes. Yep. And stand up and...
You guys see this? Let's just get a frozen shot of this guy.
keep them in the air if you think you know the answer.
If you're going to keep it in the air, keep it in the air. So we can... yes. Yep. And stand up and...
All right, what a good little lemming. I know it's not surprising, Sparky, but for the rest of you, what a good little lemming. I know, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. I know which of the 4 Ds that violates. Trump saying witch hunt, my God, that's disinformation. It needs to be censored. Look how smug they are. Unreal.
The journalist, like a good little dog, holding up his NATO-issued bullshit placard to the sitting United States president. The United States president who funded the Atlanta Council. Again, you can imagine how screaming mad I was in the White House in 2020 about this. Because I showed this video to everyone. I had a whole friggin' Encyclopedia Britannica of video archives of all this. But the United States government was funding the overthrow of the United States government. And I'm sitting here, staring across from people at the White House Budget Office saying, how can you let this happen? Donald Trump's Pentagon, who hates him and wants him gone, and Trump is warring with, I'm being asked to look up quotes for Donald Trump about what JFK had to say about betrayal by his own generals. And he's funding this event as the Pentagon trains journalists.
So Trump and MAGA Republicans, and not all MAGA Republicans, but many of them, most of them, and Republicans in general are literally continuing to sign the budget for these agencies that are then using that money to censor the very constituents that are voting these people in. Do you understand that? Your congressman that you get out there and vote for that's a Republican because you're in some deep red rural area, so a Republican's going to win, you vote for them, people like Mike Johnson, then he pushes through funding for all of these intel agencies, State Department, etc., who then use that funding to censor you, the very constituent that voted for people like Mike Johnson in the first place.
To stop the ability to use social media to counter media propaganda about Russiagate. So here, good little dog journalist gets his little NATO doggy treat. Let's see what he says.
Speak loudly, and actually even better, wait for the mic to come. Thank you.
Well, it's obviously, it can be any number of the Ds. You can say it's...
Oh, there's another one. They called on a different person.
distorting what they're saying. Or
It could be any one. We could get this censored as disinformation as any one of these four. So let's just listen to this.
or distracting them from whatever the issue is saying. The issue isn't real. They're just after me because, as their witches and it's evil, I'm the injured party here.
I'm the injured party here, so it distracts from the integrity of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Could be a whole lot of them. Trump's got a nice range when it comes to disinformation.
Trump's got a nice range when it comes to disinformation.
Does anyone have a number one pick that they would like to mention related to this one? They said dismissed. But
Yes,
wait.
dismissed.
Now, I thought that was interesting that journalist, whoever it was in the crowd, said, Trump's just all disinformation. He's got a huge range of disinformation. It could be all four of these that we would call this disinformation. Remember, the context of this is how to control disinformation online, how to censor it. From a NATO cutout. And the journalist's like, oh, Trump's just disinformation. Yes, there could be any of the things.
Yeah.
Dismissed?
Yeah.
Other voices? How many of you think dismissed? Raise your card, please.
Look at that. They get everyone to raise their placard in consensus agreement that Trump's tweet is disinformation. NATO, training, using peer pressure, getting them all in a room, issuing them state-issued, Pentagon-funded placard cards that read the word bullshit on it, and encouraging them really get into the guts of it and find an even stronger articulation for how we can get Trump's tweet calling Russiagate a witch hunt. Because remember, this is before. This was June 21. The Mueller hearing was in. I'm sorry. This is June 2019.
By the way, look at that. 751 views. That's it. That's all that saw this, other than the people that were there.
The Mueller hearing, I believe, was in July of 2019. So Russiagate was at its absolute apex, and they needed it, and they needed political support for Mueller. Because just weeks later, Mueller was to testify about all the evidence, and then it all came crashing down because it turned out Mueller had fucking bubkiss.
We're onto something here.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Hey, wait, Jennifer, I clipped this. You can go to the FFO Rumble channel. Here, let me show you the link that you can go to for this, okay? Like, we can just watch from this, if you guys want, because I think I even captioned it.
Track.
So here goes.
yeah, absolutely. So you're right that underneath that attempt there are, he's twisting the story, he's accusing somebody else of the same thing, right? But
He's twisting the story. He's accusing someone else
the
doing
main
it.
thing is what he's saying is like, don't listen to them because it's a witch hunt.
So it's disinformation because he's saying don't listen to them.
So that was our first point.
All right. Number two.
Getting
Number 2 is a Brexit ad. Vote.
What did I always say? What are the two things? The two populist things that scared the shit out of them? Trump, Brexit. What's the first two tweets that they talk about? Trump saying witch hunt, and then a Brexit ad. Again, here's the guy's Twitter handle. You can put it up. Now, I know if my friend Sparky's on here, he again isn't surprised. Of course, not surprised, of course. He's smarter than me. It's not that I'm surprised that they would go after Trump and Brexit. I'm surprised at the types of things they said that they're going after. That even this low bar, just saying the word witch hunt, disinformation, it needs to be censored. Sparky saw it coming. Great. He could join the folks last night, the three people last night that was like, it's not even worth talking about this. It's old news. We all knew about this. Great job, Sparky. Anyways, isn't that interesting? The very first things, the two topics that they talk about, Trump saying the word witch hunt, disinformation, how can we censor it? And then a bus advertisement pushing for Brexit. So let's see what this advertisement says. We send the EU 350 million pounds a week. Let's fund our national healthcare service instead. Vote leave. This is the disinformation. Now, are you going to say, perhaps they don't send 350 million pounds a week? No, that's not what their accusation is going to be. It doesn't matter if that's true. This is still disinformation. So let's see how they say this is disinformation that needs to be censored.
To leave the European Union because we send the EU 350 million pounds a week. Let's fund our NHS instead, their own public health care instead. So understand, this is a factually true data point. The United Kingdom, as part of the European Union, was taking United British citizen taxpayer money and giving 350 million pounds a week to the EU when they had an underfunded public health system through the NHS in crisis. They said, we want to make Britain great again. We want affordable health care. Instead of paying the EU, let's leave the EU so that we don't die from a 18-month waiting list from our underfunded NHS. But NATO badly wanted to stop the United Kingdom from leaving the EU. The State Department badly wanted to stop the United Kingdom from leaving the EU. And then even post-Brexit's formal passing, to shape the nature of the Brexit so that it was effectively blunted, because that's what ended up happening. They basically are still in the EU economically, just not formally, because they were able to destroy the Brexit Party and Nigel Farage's movement and co-opt it in the whole Liz Truss disaster. But this is a factual data point. There's nothing mis or disinformation about this. But according to the State Department definition, this is malinformation, because even though it's a factually true statement, it still undermines public faith and confidence in the narrative that Brexit is bad for the British people. So understand, the State Department wanted to stop Trump because of his neutrality with Eurasia diplomacy, stopping the Seize Eurasia Atlantis blob, and they wanted to stop Brexit. So they funded the Atlantic Council to train hundreds of journalists to censor all social media speech which supported Donald Trump or Brexit. Oh, did I not post a link here? Link here, okay.
Topical here.
Remember, cards up when you have an idea.
Remember, cards up, hold up your state-issued bullshit placard.
Back here, and please wait for the mic.
Distort.
Distort. And Ben Nimmo, DARPA man, Atlantic Council man, Graphica, literal frigging professional NATO PSYOP guy who's now at Facebook, says, you're the man, you're right. Distort.
Any other takers? Any
Well,
suggestions?
let's ask, how many of you think this one has distort involved?
Look at everyone raising their placards. Good, I'm getting it right. I got the exercise right.
Okay, that's a lot.
Look at everyone holding up a
Any
bullshit
other-
placard and smiling. Ah, yes.
Do you
I'm
see how
getting it now,
smug
guys.
they are? Do you see how smug they are? Yeah, I did it. I did. Distort. That's distortion. It's distortion.
Boy, this is powerful stuff. I can report fucking anything. Someone says we're paying 350 million pounds to the EU. Disinformation. What do you mean disinformation? This is literally government data, but it's distracting.
Devices anyone wants to mention? We've got a big hand over here. Let's. Oh, were you just kept your hand up? Her hand goes back down. Are there any others? Or are we just going to stick with that one? Yes, man, right here. Distract. Okay. So for those who couldn't hear, it's also distract because it's trying to focus attention on the NHS.
So this is reportable for disinformation because it's distracting the British public on focusing on domestic problems on the NHS when they should be focused on how great staying in the EU is. Do you understand why the top-level framing that I said on the Tucker segment is this is the end of civilian control over government? This is all four branches of the U.S. military paying its intermediary, the Atlantic Council, to kill the ability for civilians to vote against a policy opposed by the Pentagon and the State Department, the CIA, the blob.
Rather than the vote itself.
Rather than the vote itself. But you make the vote based on the information. I mean,
Did you hear what he just said there? He said, oh, you're focusing on the NHS rather than the vote itself. But isn't the reason you're going to choose to vote for Brexit or not based on whether or not you think that the money that you're sending or the benefit you get is worth the cost? How is it not a legitimate reason to inquire if I'm a person deciding whether or not to vote for Brexit or not? Wouldn't saying, hey, we're sending all this money that could be spent elsewhere. Nope, that's disinformation. You can't say that. Why? Because it's distracting. Because you should be focused on just why the EU is good. You shouldn't look at any cost of it. That distracts from the vote itself. What? We'll finish this up real quick. Again, I have to be done by 1 p.m.
it's pointless to argue against this because this is just a literal fucking astroturfed op. They don't give a flying fuck about the substance. They want it censored. That's why they're training them to do this.
One more example over here, perhaps? And the microphone is right behind you, so hang on.
Yeah, we've been having a side conversation over here about in-group, out-group dynamics, and a group I've been part of, we added a fifth D, which was divide. Because we
Divide.
kept seeing it so often.
Yes.
Very good. Very, very good. Nice.
And this thing goes on and on and on.
That great journalist added a fifth D, divide. Oh, you can't say that it's disinformation if it divides. So if you said a lot of illegal immigrants, last year, 373 illegal immigrants committed violent felonies. Oh, that's disinformation. Why? We have the data right here. That's from the official. Yeah, but it's dividing us. It's distracting us from the importance of allowing illegal immigrants in. So it's disinformation. Now, notice how I talk about, like when I was debating Destiny, one of the things I'll talk about is how they'll seemingly want to just talk about things in a vacuum. We're just concerned about whether or not this technically could meet the definition of the term insurrection. That's it. That's it. No nefarious agenda here. Technically, under some definitions, couldn't this January 6th be an insurrection? You might be like, yeah, I guess under some definitions. Ah, okay, that's it. That's all we had to say. And then they go, okay, now over here. People that support insurrectionists are fucking around and finding out if they get shot at Trump rallies. And maybe it would have been a good thing if Trump got shot because he was supporting an insurrection. You see? See how you get from point A to point B? So here it's like, we're just playing a little game to see what disinformation is. That's it. Can you come up with creative ways why we're calling all this stuff disinformation? Go ahead. Oh, it's distracting? Oh, I came up with a new D. It's dividing? Yes. All very good. Hold up your bullshit placards. Now, we're going to talk about why it's important to censor disinformation online. Now, the person that hears why is it important to censor disinformation online, they might be thinking, oh, for example, they're talking about someone standing up and saying, blacks commit 100% of the murders, and that's racist, and it's not true, and blah, blah, blah. That's disinformation. So maybe it's important to keep that information. Now, you might say, but I'm still free speech. I wouldn't support that. Nonetheless, that's what an average person could see. They're not seeing, oh, and by the way, what do we define as disinformation? Anything that could distract us from what we think is important. Anything that could cause dismay to people. Anything that we say could divide people. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, using the term witch hunt. That's disinformation. It should be censored off online. And with glee in their voice, they all, yes, here's my bullshit card. I too think it's bullshit. Let's come up with new ways that we could call shit disinformation so that we can encourage it to be censored. There's a reason that I've said a bigger threat than Donald Trump is Elon Musk. And in the new Tucker interview that Mike Benz does, he talks specifically about how you have people, I forget the name of the guy, what organization he was from, that said that Elon Musk is more of a threat than Russia. Because the U.S. government relies on so much of Musk's technology for things that if he can't be under their thumb, that's more of a threat than Russia. Elon Musk is more of a threat than Trump. Because their ability to control the flow of information is tantamount to them maintaining power. Now, that doesn't mean Musk is a great guy and he'll always do the best thing and he'll never cave and he's totally free speech absolutist. Probably none of that's true. But he's someone that's seen as a thorn in their side. They could sabotage another Trump presidency, but it's very difficult if people are allowed to speak their mind on the most prolific politics social media platform like X, very difficult to rein that in. Same with Telegram. And that's what Mike Benz got started on this, talking about the leader of Telegram being arrested. So please check out Mike Benz. I think he was amazing. I was absolutely shocked. Again, sorry, my friend Aircraft Sparky. I get it. You didn't find this interesting. You weren't shocked at all. I was shocked at just the gamesmanship of it. Let's play a game. Everybody get your bullshit placards. Yay, all you journalists. Let's look at the dangerous disinformation tweet. Oh, Trump said witch hunt. Yeah, that should be censored. That's disinformation. Can we come up with new ways to say? I was shocked by it. The spectacle of it. Absolutely shocked to see that in plain day. Shocking to me. Not to Aircraft Sparky. Got it. God, it wasn't shocking to him. He knew. He already knew about all this shit. No big news here. Yep, I know they do all that shit, so nothing to see. For the rest of us to see that play out in that manner, I think is unbelievable. And it inspires me to do even more research that I know people like Aircraft Sparky or the guys from last night will say, why are you wasting your time doing research? Why are you wasting your time looking into this stuff? We know that they do all of this stuff. We know it, so why research into it? I find this stuff interesting, and I think that it's important. And the more proof you can get straight from the horse's mouth to try to convince people of just how corrupt this is and how they want to control the flow of information and censor any argument that goes against their agenda, I think that that's trying to do the right thing to push us in the correct agenda or correct direction. And remember, the issue that I've talked about over and over again is, to me, I'm a single issue voter when it comes to this corruption. that if we have corrupt institutions and so our voices can't be heard, that it doesn't matter if me and you disagree on universal health care or abortion issues or any other issue, because our voice doesn't matter anyways, because all of these institutions are ran by people that don't give a shit. They might pretend to care about us, but they don't. So whatever they want's what's actually going to happen. And unless we solve that corruption, then none of these other issues really matter what our disagreements are. And Mike Benz's reporting goes right in line with that. It shows how the way he phrases it is, the single issue that he is concerned with is free speech online. And I think that is right hand in hand with what I've been saying for 5-6 years on this channel and elsewhere. So, apologies to those in my audience. Again, I know I'm hyping on this a lot, but it just, especially Sparky, I just find it, why are you gaslighting everyone to say that you're shocked by this? Okay, dude. Okay. I guess it's becoming a theme. And again, this is something for me. Maybe I'm just too petty. I should just let shit go, whatever. But it's always, to me, I'm always more shocked by the people on our side that are undermining us than the people on the left. Of course, I expect people from the left to say, Twitter files are no big deal. This is no big deal. So what? The Atlantic Council said that. Who cares? Yeah, they should censor disinformation, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I expect them to say that. Of course, I expected big government socialists on the left to say, yeah, we should have government lockdowns. What was shocking to me was to see people that called themselves small government conservatives saying, oh yeah, 15 days to slow the spread. That's what I found shocking. What's shocking to me is to see things like this straight from the horse's mouth. The gamesmanship of it. Dangerous disinformation, Trump saying witch hunt. And to see people that I respect on our own side saying, I'm not surprised. No big deal. Not surprised at all. Of course we knew this. What's the implication? Why even talk about it? Good, man. Great. Fuck. Hell. We'll never win, man. We're never going to win with these people. We're never going to win with them. Ever. Stick a fork in us. What are we going to talk about? Let's talk about Arlington Cemetery again today. Let's talk about that again. I'm weak so often because I allow myself to be controlled by the story of the day that's shaped by the very people that are controlling this narrative. All the time, I do it. Then when I go out and talk about things that I think, oh, this is massively important, I'm barraged by people on our own side saying, why are you talking about this? Of course this happens. What, you shocked? We already knew it. Okay, dude, sorry. Let's go back to talking about what the Democrats want. Joy? Brat? Right? Is that cool? Is that what we should be doing? Should I go debate January 6th again? Will that make you happy? Fuck! What is wrong with you people? Man, it reminds me of during COVID when I was like doing all these streams and I'm seeing all these people's lives that I know in my real life, lives falling apart, not able to visit their parents in a nursing home. I'm working with autistic people that can no longer visit their families and their lives are going to pot, like people losing their small businesses. And then I'm seeing Democrats pushing for BLM, violating their own lockdown orders. Our governor calling people cowards for not supporting his lockdown. Meanwhile, he violates his own orders. People like Gavin Newsom going to the French Laundry. People like, what was the woman's name? The mayor of Chicago that goes in front of everyone and goes, of course I violated my orders to go to a beauty salon because looks are important to me. Hygiene's important to me. Like it's not to the rest of us. And people are like, why are you so angry? Why you talk about this? Why are you so angry? Fuck you people. Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you talking about it? How about that? I assume most of it's because people didn't know. But those that are telling me, of course we know. Of course I'm not surprised. Cool, then why weren't you talking about it? I must have missed your show. Were you talking about this? God. But I do love Sparky. He's a good guy. Told him I'll do a show Monday, so maybe we'll hash it out and I'll argue with him. But I can't believe, like, it'd be one thing if he's like, I'm not surprised about this. But to keep tweeting, why are you gaslighting people? Why are you gaslighting that you're surprised? Right. Okay. Yeah, Jack Jace, I'm a person. I'm a man. It's difficult sometimes for me to refocus on exactly what I talk about. It is a weakness of mine. And I'm definitely more likely to get distracted by people on my own side that are doing things like that. Anyways, check out Mike Benz if you take anything from this today. I will not be streaming this evening. I'm not going to worry about rating anyone. I got to get going. Sparky. Okay. We'll do this real quick. Aircraft Sparky, first comment. Who is this guy and why does it matter? Then you say it's kind of crazy. This is how you talk to kindergartners. How is this surprising? Hold on. Why are you gaslighting us? You shouldn't be surprised at this. I'm just saying I know this doesn't surprise you. I think it's important, just not surprising. Why am I gaslighting you? I am genuinely surprised for the reasons that I said. Illustrated that several times, and you kept saying, but why are you surprised by this? Why are you surprised? Okay. To me, the obvious implication of this is this isn't a big story. Of course, this is what they do. We all knew this. Same shit as last night. Whatever. I don't think Sparky's a lefty. I think Sparky is... I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. I don't know if it's black-pilled. I don't know if it's people that have their specific topics that they like to talk about, and when they hear other stuff, they just say, it's like the people you talk to, they're like, why even vote? The votes are all going to be stolen. Why even vote? Why even do it? Why even talk about it? Who cares? Why even talk about it? Who cares? Why even talk about the election? They're going to steal it no matter what. It's like, okay, then go watch reruns of The Simpsons. I don't know what to say. Good for you. You all but ensure that there'll never be political change if you say, well, I'm going to completely disengage and say I'm not surprised by anything, etc., etc. I don't get it. But I don't think Sparky's a bad actor. I don't think he's someone that's like you're pretending to be conservative. I think Sparky's more conservative than me. So I don't know where it comes from. But all right, I'm out. You guys have a great day. Next you'll see me is probably Monday. Going out in the boat today with my family, and then tomorrow we're going camping. And then I got a big week next week, but I should be streaming a lot. But I got my brother's birthday. I'm going to that. My 10th anniversary. So it should all be good. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I took next week off work. So you'll probably hear from me Monday streaming. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate you all. As always, have a good one.